October 8th, 2025 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. Paper copies of the agenda are available for those here in person, and the full packet is available on our website. Reviewing our agenda, first we'll consider our consent agenda. There are 5 items on that agenda. After our consent agenda, we'll have general public comment. We welcome general public comment for addressing issues not on today's agenda, but otherwise related to county business. Given our time and the need to have an orderly and efficient meeting, we apply certain rules regarding public comments. We'll do our best to enforce these rules consistently without regard to the point of view expressed by the speaker. Here are the rules. Each speaker will be limited to a total of 3 minutes of speaking time. However, we'll accept public comment of any length in writing. 2, individual speakers may not donate unused time to other speakers. 3, all comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission. And 4, we reserve the right to mute or remove any speaker whose comments are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent. Campaigning for public office during the public comment period is not allowed. Please give your full name and address for our meeting minutes and address your comments to the Commission. Please also know that the comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but we value the input. We don't usually respond to general public comments on the spot, but if you'll leave your contact information with staff, we'll try to get specific questions answered. After that, we'll move to our regular agenda. There are 2 items on our regular agenda. The first item is the financial statement and conclusion of the fiscal year 2024 audit. And the second item is information about the 2026 property tax rebate program. For each action item, we'll hear from staff or the applicant, followed by questions from the Commission, and then open the item up for public comment relative to that item. Once public comment is closed, we'll bring the item back to the Commission for further discussion and a vote. Lastly, recording this meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. With that, we'll move to our consent agenda. Commissioners, is there any item on the consent agenda you'd like to have removed for further discussion? Seeing none. Anyone in the public like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll bring it back up to the Commission, and I welcome any motions.
Recommend we approve consent agenda items 1.1 through 1.5. Second.
Moved and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. I should have mentioned Commissioner Dorsey is not with us tonight. He's a little under the weather. So we'll move on to general public comment. If you'd like to provide general public comment, now is the time. Please step up to the podium and provide it.
John Ems, 66049. Oh, sorry, John Ems, 66049. Sometimes general public comment speakers have their home addresses placed in the published minutes of the county meetings. I say sometimes because having reviewed the last year of minutes, the home addresses of some are never published. The home addresses of others are sometimes published, and some individuals' home addresses are always published. I hesitate to imply that this is intentional or nefarious, but I do object to the practice in general and in principle. There's no reason that I can see that public speakers' home addresses be published in the minutes, and I formally request that this practice be stopped. The city does not do it, and the state gives instructions for citizens to avoid publication of personal addresses. We've entered a new age in which doxing is frequently initiated to expose private or identifying information without the person's consent. At least for me, and I expect many, if not all others, identified in the published minutes, the Commission does not have and did not ask for consent. Doxing is an intimidating practice, and there is an implied threat in doing it. There are certainly others in the world that can and do use personal information for criminal intent. The practice could very well be inhibiting some citizens from participating in civic engagement. I hope that is not the intent of the Commission. As our country electeds, I note that your home addresses are not easily found or not present at all on county websites. Although it does not take much effort to discover anyone's personal information and home addresses on the internet, I see no reason to include it in published commission meeting notes. Addresses ought to be removed from all posted minutes, but at the least, please stop doxing citizens who speak in front of you, starting with tonight's minutes. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
My name is Dr. Justin Spees. I want to talk about an LJ World article that was written the other day by that reporter right there, Josie Hemsouth, or whatever the fuck her name is, and approved by editor Chad Lawhorn. Had to do with Patrick Kelly right there attending a panel at the Lawrence Library on Monday, and that article is titled "Panel with Lawrence Officials Explore How to Restore Civility in Public Conversations." And that whole thing was geared towards basically myself and Michael from Lawrence Accountability back there. Painted you guys as the victim, that you had to listen to some fucking cuss words in here and be called a pussy every now and then when you're actually being a fucking pussy. And in it, the article says, quote, I'm getting this right, Josie? In another instance, last spring, one commenter was arrested, that's me, it links to it, that's me, on suspicion of, quote, interfering with the conduct of public business after repeatedly insulting Kelly with sexually graphic language at meetings and arguing with the commission chair. And that sexually graphic language was, what was it, Patrick? Women have more balls than Patrick too. And I said precisely that, and I had it on a sign, and you, Karen Wiley, and you, Shannon Reed, stopped the meeting and stopped me from speaking and called the deputies to come and arrest me for that, which was the suspicion of interfering with the conduct of public business. But let's see what the district attorney had to say about that. On May 20th, so 3 weeks later, she wrote a letter that said a complaint will not be filed by the district attorney's office against the above mentioned individual at this time for interference with conduct of public business and public meetings. I declare under penalty of perjury that the above is true and foregoing is true and correct, executed on May 20th, 2024. And so I filed a lawsuit on that arrest as well. And let's see what the judge had to say on that. So defendants Channel and Coleman, who are the two deputies that came and arrested me, entered the room and arrested plaintiff for disrupting a meeting in violation of KSA 2159-22. Again, based on those allegations, which the court accepts as true, a prudent person would not believe that plaintiff had disrupted, even arguably disrupted the commission meeting in violation of that. So as pled, Channel and Coleman violated clearly established law by arresting plaintiff without probable cause for silently standing in the meeting room without blocking or hindering the meeting. Hey, Josie, why don't you include that in your article? That's a pretty damning piece of information right there. There was no probable cause. So those officers, they lost
Justin,
their
please
qualified
direct your
immunity.
comments to the.
They lost their qualified immunity. And what that means is that there, right, guys? Right? That there was no reason to arrest me in there. I was engaged in a constitutionally protected activity. So my question is, who's actually being uncivil in this? Is it you motherfuckers that are using these guys with guns and authority to take us out of here for saying the word motherfucker or saying the word balls? And then you have reporters run cover for you victims when actually you're the ones that are doing it to us.
That was interesting, some of the things he was talking about, because I've had the same experience. You know, I remember a time where we weren't allowed to come up here and say motherfucker without risking a deputy coming up and arresting us. Can somebody remind me why that changed? Erica, do you know why that changed? Patrick does. And since the Lawrence Journal World won't report on it very much, I'll let everybody know why it changed. The reason it changed was because a federal judge said that you guys couldn't create those kind of rules. said that that kind of it was hard to see how there was a disruption during an allotted 3-minute speaking time that we had 3 minutes already. So how can we be disruptive during that 3 minutes? And that's what this fight was all about. Before your time, Erica, I really didn't come into the Douglas County Commission meeting much. They can tell you that. My fight was at the city and with police. A little bit with Douglas County Sheriff's Department, but mostly with the police. But I watched what happened when somebody tries to say things that you object to. You guys had your enforcers carrying him out of here right and left, putting them in a bad spot. But you didn't seem to care. All you guys seemed to care about were your feelings up there and making sure that somebody didn't get offended with somebody's speech. The freedom of speech is offensive. That's why it's been fought for. People have died over it. You know, there's not many in this room that lived through the 60s. Maybe a few of the older guys here have. I know John Ems did. And he can tell you that people fought hard, took beatings, took arrests, went to court, went to the Supreme Court. That's the situation that you guys have created here. We're now going to deal with this in court, and it's going to cost all these people money because of your feelings, because they're having to pay attorneys to defend you. They might end up having to pay the attorneys that are suing on our behalf. They might end up having to pay punitive settlements. These are the risks that you take when you violate civil rights. Can anybody give me a count on the number of curse words I used? See, nobody keeps track when they're not being said, do they?
Any other public comment? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay, we'll close public comment and move on to our regular business items, and we'll start with the financial statement and conclusion of FY 2024 audit. And I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Commissioners, I'm going to have Brooke Sauer and Tara Laughlin with AGH come forward and present the financial statements.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Tara. She'll go over the governance letter that was provided in the packet tonight and talk about some details about the 2024 financial statement.
Good evening. Make sure you can hear me here. As Brooke said, I'm Tara Laughlin with AGH. For those of you new to the commission from last year, I have about 15 years of experience in government accounting and auditing. I first off just want to thank Brooke, Sarah, and really all the staff. We touch a lot of departments at the county during this audit, interrupt their day-to-day activities. And I just want to thank them for their assistance throughout the audit process. I always like to let you know that everybody's very open and transparent with us, gets us information timely in order to get through that audit. I also want to touch on the scope of services that we do for the county. We do the financial statement audit, which is us giving an opinion on whether the financial statements materially reflect the books and records of the county during the fiscal year 2024. One thing I do want to point out for those of you new to the commission from last year is in our opinion, which starts pretty much on page 1, you'll see that there's actually 2 opinions there. One's labeled adverse and one's labeled unmodified. The adverse opinion relates to the fact that the county has elected not to do generally accepted accounting principle financial statements, which is allowed under the Kansas statute, as long as it's elected every year. So we have an adverse opinion that pretty much just states these are not GAAP financial statements. And then we have an unmodified opinion that is related to the regulatory basis of financial statements. And an unmodified opinion is also a clean opinion, which means that the information in here does materially reflect the books and records of the county for that fiscal year. So I did want to just explain those 2 different opinions. And then pretty much what I like to cover is our required communications, which is in the governance letter that is issued every year. And I like to highlight on the particular things related specifically to the current fiscal year. At the bottom of the first page just talks about what I just talked about, that the county has elected to do regulatory basis financials versus GAAP financial statements. And there was really no change at this for those regulatory basis financials. So if you see changes in the financials looking at last year's or this year's on actuals, that's because activity changed, not because of the way something is presented was required to be changed. On the second page, we discuss management's accounting estimates. For regulatory basis financial statements, only one of these is actually reflected in the numbers that's on the face of the financial statements. And that's the second one related to incurred but not reported claims for health insurance. That is the estimate, since the county is self-insured, of claims that were incurred before year end, but you don't quite know about it yet just because of the timing of how long health claims take to come to light. So the county does provide us information every year from their providers that helps with that estimation process. And that estimate is recorded as a payable to the best of the abilities of the information available at the time. The other two items listed in this estimates is really footnote disclosure only under the regulatory basis of financial statements, both related to payroll type activities. One is compensated absences, so it's just reporting how much employees have accrued in sick vacation leave, what that policy is, and how much is kind of banked at the end of the year that could potentially be paid out when those employees retire or otherwise terminate. The other one in the footnote disclosure is a net pension liability. This is the county's share of the CAPERS retirement liability. So there is a footnote there that just kind of explains the CAPERS plan and what the county's share is, including the health department's share and other entities that roll up into the county's financial statements. All in all, our responsibility as it relates to those estimates is to make sure that the information being used is reasonable, that it's being reported as required. If there's any calculations, that those are being done correctly. And in all instances, we found those estimates were being either reasonably presented or disclosed, whichever way was needed. At the bottom of page 2, then, we are required to provide to you any audit adjustments that we noted during the audit process. So these are items during our testing that came to light that needed to be reflected within the financial statements. This year, we had 3. 2 of them relate to current year activity. The first one relates to the incurred but not reported claims that I just discussed. We do assist in recording that payable every year with the information the county provides us. So that's a pretty standard adjustment we have every year. The second one relates to during our testing, looking for potentially unrecorded accounts payable items, so services or purchases that were made prior to year end that weren't paid until after year end. We do testing on that. We did identify one item that did need to get recorded that wasn't originally recorded in the information provided to us. So that is the second adjustment. And then the third adjustment listed is related to a prior year adjustment that didn't get recorded in the system. So we just had to re-record it in order to get kind of those beginning numbers to roll correctly. The second item in that section is related to uncorrected misstatements. I always like to explain this term. That would be items similar to kind of audit adjustments that come up during the audit process, but management doesn't think it would materially impact users of the financials, and we agree that it wouldn't. So while they're identified, they're not actually reflected within the financials until the next year. It's a timing issue, but we didn't have any of that. So all the items that were found during the audit process were posted within the financials. Top of page 3 addresses kind of what I kicked off my presentation with. We had no disagreements with management during the audit process. Again, all the departments we work with were very open and got us information timely in order to complete the audit. The remainder of page 3 just explains kind of what the rules are related to independence. We are independent of the county. We're not involved in any sort of management decisions or any of that in order to maintain that independence. So we do just report this information every year for your knowledge of what we have to do to make sure both the county and us work together to make sure we're maintaining that independence and a service isn't being provided somewhere else that would impact that. And we meet all the independent standards, including the government audit independent standards, which is a layer on top of just normal audit standards. Then on page 4 are items that we do put in the governance letter every year, really for any industry. It's not government specific. They're just items we like to let the commission know about, have on the top of your mind if you want to ask management questions about these areas. They're just kind of general business risk areas. So related to, electronic wire transfers, it's just low-hanging fruit for issues to occur there, along with cybersecurity. They kind of go hand in hand. So again, that's just informational purposes. That way, if you think about it during the year and ask your IT folks or Sarah, just make sure you're comfortable with what the county's doing in those areas. As far as my required communications, that kind of covers the letter. I'm going to hit on just a couple of things within the financial statements themselves as well, and then open it up to see if you have any questions as well. Within the financial statements, I do want to point out in footnote 2, we kind of discuss how not the actual, like what actually happened is presented, but the budget numbers that are presented. We have gone back to how it was presented 2 years ago. Either way is correct, and I see it about 50-50 across all of my client bases, both audit and consulting. It really just depends on what the entity wants to or chooses to present. As long as those total budget numbers don't exceed what was certified with the state, it's okay. But it did go back to how it was presented 2 years ago, which includes the full, what's called the cash carry forward line within your certified budget, which is really what you're estimating your beginning cash next year is going to be. You are allowed to spend up to your total cash, so that kind of varies within the budgeted expenditures to get that full budget authority presented. And that choice was made this year is because I think it just was easier for general users of the financial statements to be able to just pull up the certified budget and pull up the financials and see that it ties. But again, either way is properly presented as long as that total number didn't exceed what the state certified budget was. And then just because we do have some new commissioners, we do have a second auditor's report that's at the end of the financial statements, and I just kind of wanted to explain what that is. We are required to do this audit under government auditing standards because the county is required to have a single audit, which is the audit of the county's use of federal expenditures. Now, that single audit is done by another firm, not us. But because you do fall into that bucket for financial reporting purposes, we are required to present this extra auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance, which is looking at items specific to the financial statements that could materially impact the financial statements. So that's what the auditor report is for. And we would present there then any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control that we find during the audit process, provide recommendations for the county to implement and improve processes going forward. Last year, we did have an item presented there related to a control that used to be in place that would turnover kind of dropped off to help alleviate a segregation of duties issues within the payroll department. And that was having somebody outside of the payroll department checking changes to payroll, just to help alleviate the segregation of duties that's within that smaller department. That control was re-implemented. So every year we look to make sure that those compensating controls that are in place in areas that have segregation of duties, that those compensating controls are in place. So that was re-implemented. We did check it. It was being done. Therefore, we noted that the status was complete. And again, we'll check and make sure it's being done next year too. And that way, if it's turnover and it kind of falls through the cracks again, we'll report it again. But for now, that is being done appropriately. So I just wanted to explain what that back auditor's report was for. And then at this time, I'll hand it over for any questions you might have.
Thanks, Tara. Appreciate the report and the audit, all the work that you've done. Commissioners, do you have any questions? I just want to make sure I understand. I'm going to get to the right page. I think it's at the bottom. Our pages are one off from yours, Tara. And it talked about a change in the amount of fund balance. That was lowering our end of year fund balance. Is that correct? By 2 million?
Or the audit adjustment?
Mhm.
Yeah, so we found an item that should have been recorded as an accounts payable at year end and wasn't. So we recorded it, which increased your expense, which would have reduced, yes, your ending
All right.
cash balance for the year. It was paid after year end, but it was for a service before year end.
And that historically, it seems like that sometimes we do have things that sort of get paid and after the end of the fiscal year, and we make those adjustments through the audit, but that's not
Correct.
side of normal, really? Is that-
Yeah, through any audit process, usually you find one or two things like this, because there were other items that were, and they were appropriately posted back to year end. So this was one item of the, I don't know how many we tested, but quite a few that wasn't in the right period.
Thank you.
And was that a capital project?
I believe it was. I'd have to go back and look at the invoice.
It was.
Yeah.
And that's also gets a little confusing too, because from budget law, from budgetary, there's those funds roll from every year. So, there's an issue with that. We close our books at the end of January. So if that invoice came in early February, even though it was attributed back to the prior year, we've closed the books and we don't reopen them until we go through audit.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, we'll open this up for public comment. I'd like to provide public comment on this item. Please come forward and do so.
Brent Bovee, 66050. There are at least 3 significant issues with the audited financial statements for 24. I found 3 items that must be publicly highlighted, explained by the county staff to the public, and discussed by all of you tonight before you approve these statements. First item of concern relates to Schedule 1. I just heard the explanation as to why 2023 was changed and why it's changed back. What disappoints me is that I asked about this multiple times last year and nobody gave me that explanation, not once. I never heard one reason why that was changed. It's pretty evident the certified budget that's included on all those budget hearing documents and in everything else is used to calculate the ad valorem tax and is used in the mill levy calculation. Why you would deviate from that from 10 years of practice makes no sense. The second issue is a significant deficiency reported by the auditors for 23 on page 60 in the agenda packet, the lack of segregation of duties in the payroll department. After reading the condition and the corrective plan, important questions remain. Has the reconciliation for the last 2 quarters in 23 been completed? Has this internal control been in effect for all 12 months in 24 and through current in 25? Were there any specific issues of fraud identified and, more importantly, corrected and resolved? The third and most significant issue relates to schedules 2.1, 2.4, and 2.7. All 3 of these schedules present the cash receipts and expenditures of the 3 funds with the mill levy: the general fund, the road and bridge, and employee benefits. All funds contain a budgeted receipt line item for delinquent tax in the receipts section of the statement. The budget hearing documents provide clear evidence the county staff calculates a delinquent tax amount of 2.5% in 24 for each of these 3 funds when calculating the total ad valorem tax for all 3 funds. This delinquent tax is included in the mill levy calculation billed to all taxpayers in the county. All documents clearly reflect that. This is in addition to the delinquent tax budgeted in the receipt section, the expected revenue section of the annual budget. There are actual and budgeted amounts on this delinquent tax amount line for all three funds. Finally, the calculated delinquent tax of 2.5 and 24 is not included in the receipt section in the budgeted column. The budgeted receipts total on the financial statements for all these funds do not tie to the total budgeted receipts or revenues from each fund from the budget hearing. The difference is the calculated 2.5% delinquency. So what does this all mean?
And
The
that's
county,
fine.
the counties included delinquent tax twice and overbilled taxpayers by over 17.5 million over
That's time.
the
Thank you.
last decade. Please do something about it.
Any other public comment on this item? Okay, we'll bring it back up to the commission for discussion, further questions and or motions. Sarah, I want to give you a chance to talk about, or is it Tara, about the differences, and we did do something a little different in the past and we've changed that. I want to give you an opportunity to address why we made that change and why we're going back.
We met with the audit team to review that change in the schedule for this year, for the 2024 audit, and we reviewed it in detail with AGH and felt like we should go back to the past model. So
Do you remember why we made the change
I think it
initially?
was recommended it by the auditors as it was an option that's legal and allowed, and they recommended doing it at the time. At the time, we didn't think there was that much of it, but in order to be consistent, we went back.
Thanks. Other questions, commissioners? Okay.
This is Commissioner Reed. I move to approve the financial statement and conclusion of fiscal year 2024 audit.
Commissioner Kelly, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brooke. Appreciate your work.
Do want to really thank the whole team of folks that do a ton of work on this project, and it is a whole county work effort, and really, and appreciate our friends at AGH who put us through our paces.
All right, we'll go on to our second item, which is a report on the property tax rebate program.
Jake's going to kick us off.
All right, Jake, take it away.
Thanks, Commissioners. Jake Broadbent, Assistant to the County Administrator. Give me 1 second to share my screen.
Be close to that mic, Jake.
Yeah. All right, tonight we're here to talk about the property tax rebate program. This is the second year of this pilot program. Next year will be the second year. This year was the first year. First, we're going to give you a quick overview of the state homestead refund programs. Adam Rains is going to do that, County Treasurer. And then we're going to walk through some of the results we have this year from the pilot program. And then we're going to talk about some of our team's recommendations for next year. So I'll pass it to Adam.
I gave you a little handout that kind of breaks down the programs that the state has, the homestead, the SAFER, and the SVR. The SVR is a little bit new. It started a couple years ago. But the homestead maximum amount is $700. You kind of see the income limits and the requirements for which residents can qualify for that. The Safe Senior, the maximum you can get back is 75% of your property taxes paid. Of course, you can see the income limits and the requirements for that. The SVR, which is for disabled veterans and senior citizens, so they can get a portion of that property tax refunded back to them over the 2023 property tax amount. So 2025, let's say their property tax is $4,000. 2023 was $3,000. They'll get that $1,000 back. So it basically freezes back to their 2023. You can kind of see the income requirements and the resident requirements there. These are the three programs that are offered. Most of the time, these taxpayers will apply for it through their income tax returns. We get a file from the state listing out who's getting what, and then we apply that, and then the customers come in and usually just pay the rest. So that's really all I have for the programs. Any questions on it before I pass it back to Jake?
I have one.
Yeah.
What do other states do? Because I think other states have a similar program to the SVR program for seniors to kind of freeze that property tax. Do they use a similar kind of income level for that? Do you know?
Other states?
Other states.
I don't know what other states do and kind of what programs they have. It's not something I've looked at. I'm assuming they have something similar. I don't know where they pulled the SVR from. I know it was really pushed 5-6 years ago about getting something for disabled veterans and seniors about kind of freezing that property taxes for them. So
I appreciate having this information because I hear from constituents who have moved parents here or such, and they talk about a program from a prior state. So just knowing that we also have something, but I might do a little homework on that.
yeah, and these forms, the form that I have for you all, those are all sent out to every taxpayer. It's on the information sheet on the back of it, or different page, but it lists out all of this. So every taxpayer will get this information. So hopefully when they get their tax bills, they're kind of reading through some of that information and seeing if they qualify. There's a number there at the bottom you can call and talk to someone about whether or not you qualify. And then, of course, you can always talk to the county clerk's office. They can help provide some assistance with that.
And before we move on from this, I wanted to make sure we say that people can apply for both the state and county programs. There was a little bit of confusion about that last year. So this year, I just want to give you an overview of the eligibility requirements for the first year of the program. So it's kind of similar to the state homestead refund program, the one on the left on the last slide. You have to be 65 plus or a disabled veteran. Your household income needs to be at or below the 2024 HUD very low income guidelines. And our program includes 100% of Social Security, but does not include disability payments. That's different from the homestead refund program. They count 50% of Social Security. Also, your county appraised value of the home cannot exceed $350,000. That's the same as the homestead refund program. And your home cannot be used as a short-term rental, and the maximum rebate is $300 or the county portion of the property tax. So here's a little bit of our results. That's kind of hard to see from here, but as you can see, the city of Lawrence and the 66044 zip code had the most eligible applications by far. Total, we had 135 applications. 109 of those were eligible for a rebate. The 22 that were ineligible, 15 of those were over the income limit, and 7 of them were below 60, younger than 65, or not a disabled veteran, and not a disabled veteran. So here's some of the averages that we have from this year. The total amount that was rebated to taxpayers was about $31,000. And on average, that came out to $281 per household, $281. And that is a 37% rebate on the county tax and a 13% rebate on the total property tax. And the average appraised value of the home was $205,000. So some of the proposed changes for 2026 that the team came up with was to increase the maximum rebate to $400 from $300. Count half of Social Security towards the household income to bring it to the same level that the homestead refund counts Social Security. And then instead of using the HUD very low income guidelines, we're proposing to use the same level as the homestead refund program or the very low income guidelines, whichever is higher. So that chart on the right shows what that would be for each household size. And these changes will make our program more closely aligned with the homestead refund program. And it will be automatic eligibility for those who are 65 plus and disabled veterans. As far as the process for applicants, it'll look and feel the exact same as last year, except for these proposed changes if they're approved. We also plan to reach out to organizations like we did last year, the Senior Resource Center, JAAA, AARP Tax Preparation, and then the state's Veterans Office that's located in SRC. With that, I'll turn it over for questions.
We're also planning on putting something in the tax billing. So that's because we're coming to early this year so that we can get this done in time so that we can put information in the tax billing. So I think that'll help us reach more folks as well.
Jake, I know you covered this. It went pretty fast. You mentioned what number were over the income level and therefore didn't qualify, and then under the age 65. And were there also some that the home amount was out of bounds? Can you just cover those again?
I would say too, we think a lot of folks just didn't apply. Like when they found out about the program and they found out what the house value was, they just didn't bother applying. So that was part of something the team discussed, but so I think it's not a good representation of if they were interested and applied and didn't get it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think as much as anything, it's about our communication for like we had folks that applied that weren't eligible. So, and we're making some adjustments on the income, et cetera. Just trying to see how we can better communicate too.
Yeah, I think it's just making sure that we're clear with them about the income guidelines, but some folks may apply and not know it all and just go ahead and put the application in. Jason does a lot of this work. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about like some of the folks you interacted with. If you're comfortable doing that, I'm putting you on the spot.
Hi there, I'm Jason Gove. I work with the clerk's office. I talk to most of the people that come in person to apply, and pretty early on in the process, it's usually the people that were already applying for homestead, so I could see all of their information. And I would look up the house value real quick as I'm looking up the other information. If it was over that, then I would mention it, or I would mention that amount, and a lot of them would know that their house is valued at more than that, so they would stop the application process there. But the house value, I think, was more of a disqualifier for more people than it looked like because of that, because we were able to have a conversation about that before. I realized afterwards, like, it would have been better to just encourage everyone to apply, but I didn't want to get people's hopes up if I knew there was no chance they would get a refund.
And in addition to that being the value of the home being homestead's value, it's also very close to our median home value. And we felt, if the way this program is targeted towards folks that are low income and have lower amount of assets, that we wanted to keep the house value the same.
Anything else I can help with?
Jake, the proposal is to increase the maximum rebate to 400. I heard, and then another one was count 50% towards household income. I understood that the 50% was to align with the Homestead Act, and then same thing with the third recommendation. But the first recommendation, which was to increase the maximum rebate to 400, what was your rationale behind that?
So I think we thought some people may not apply for the program if it's at $300 because they think it might not be worth their time. So we're just increasing it a little bit to try to get more people to make it worth their time to apply.
Okay.
Guess I'd also add too that when you look at it's page 7 of Jake's materials, the percentage of county tax that was rebated was only 37%. So if we're trying to have a bigger impact on those folks by increasing it to 400, it's going to make a bigger impact on the amount of county tax that we're rebating. So I think that's also something that at least was important to me as we were talking about it. I want to say this team really wants to help folks out. So they're really eager to sort of like, how can we do more? How can we help more people? And so that was really our mindset as we looked at revising the program.
And just a reminder, we have 500,000 from our fund balance towards this, right?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, let's see if there's some public comment. Would anybody like to provide public comment on this item? Anyone online, Sarah? All right, bring it back up to the commission for comments.
I'll just comment that I really appreciate this program being in place, and that we, I think, evaluating it year after year and sort of assessing what the alignment with Homestead and some of these other tax refund programs at the state level look like. I'll be interested to see how it might influence the data and usage of it in the future, but happy to support the proposed changes, and found it really curious to know that I don't think I ever realized, because I've never supported anyone through the homestead property tax refund process, that 50% of household of Social Security income was a limit. I've not seen that in other types of financial assistance applications and stuff. So I think that might be a real key factor in increasing usage and eligibility, which I'm happy about.
I did used to be a volunteer through the AARP tax aid program, and folks who are eligible or close to eligible for that homestead rebate are usually really aware, and there's a lot of kind of robust support about making sure that people who are eligible can apply. And so I think matching that a little more closely is a huge help for those who are kind of helping folks navigate this and folks who are navigating it on their own. I do think that's a help. I'm glad to see the increase for the maximum rebate. So we're trying to figure this out as we go along. I think my expectation when we allocated funds for the program was that they would be used more robustly. And so I'm not sure how much of that is we need to get the word out more. We need to change some income guidelines, those sorts of things. But I'm curious to see it used more widely and really, very appreciative of all the staff that kind of help keep this in front of people so that we can have people take advantage of it.
Agreed. I just want to say thank you to staff for working on this. And I also appreciate the increase to 400, because I think oftentimes people do look at the amount of effort that it might take to actually research or to get in and fill out paperwork, and they do value impact and effort on what they're actually going to get out of it. And so hopefully the additional $100 might actually encourage individuals to take that additional effort and to see what that actually might mean for them, and then to see that impact in their wallet. And then we can see that impact at the county level when they spend those dollars on, in the stores, hopefully in our stores at the county level. So really appreciate everybody's effort in bringing this forward, and look forward to seeing what that actually looks like.
Well, I'm super excited that we got this done and that we're starting to get more data, and we're able to help out people. I do wonder, I appreciate hearing how it's impacting individuals. I don't want to put a ton more work on staff, but I do think it would be interesting just to make a note of, we had someone come in, this is the reason they decided not to, it just may be a checklist, or so that we get more data. I don't know if I would be surprised. Maybe this is a question, like, do we have an idea of the average home value of people over 65? I know that sounds like a crazy thing that we probably wouldn't have.
I don't think we have age data on homeowners.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that we would, but I'm just trying to get my head around, like, how many people are we say like we thought there would be more, but we really have no idea how many there are, and what is that number? So I'm just curious about that. And then I'd be interested, in the future, thinking about as the even though we hold, you know, in the past, we have lowered mill rate, but that means that people's tax liability still increased because of assessed valuation. Is there some way to look at that number and include that in our calculations when we're thinking about I mean, we sort of chose 400 because we just want to do more. But is there other ways of thinking about what the adjustment on that number? My hunch is that number is going to be pretty small in the end, but I'd like to think about how we're thinking about whether it's 300, 400, 500, 1,000. How do we get to that number? What's a calculation we might use that might have an impact? So I don't know the answer to that. That's for staff to continue to work on, but just something to think about.
I think we could look at like what would be the county tax amount paid on that average of that home value and look at that and have it, you know, obviously it could be a not to exceed, you know, you're not going to rebate more taxes than they paid. But that's something we can look at as we go forward, as we continue to tweak this and try to make sure we reach the, you know, the most people we can.
Yeah, I just noticed that one was this safe
Saver.
you know, that is actually a percentage of the property tax paid. Like maybe, I don't know. I'm just trying to think.
We
of different
thought about
ways.
that and thought it was going to be really hard, complicated to
Okay.
manage. So
Yeah.
that was one of the things okay.
You want to
Jay,
come up
yeah.
here and say that, Adam?
Come on, Adam.
I can also get you homestead numbers for what we've collected or what we've got back from the state for the past couple years. And maybe that can kind of give us a better number of, did we get 100? Did we get 20? Did we get 50? And then maybe that can kind of align with how many we're getting. And hopefully we're reaching those customers. And we have that information for whose property they're paying on. So maybe we can reach out to those individuals or send them letters saying, hey, here's this program that you qualified for homestead. You would also qualify for the county rebate of $400 and hopefully make some progress with that too.
Yeah, I just appreciate all the work and how we're acting a little experimental in this space, trying to figure out like what might be something we try and being open to trying new things. So great. I'm happy to make a recommendation, commissioners, unless you have further comments and questions. Motion, I think. I move to authorize the 2026 property tax rebate program with the changes recommended by staff.
Second.
Dueling seconds. We'll let Robin figure that out. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you all for your work on that program. We appreciate it. That ends our regular agenda. We'll move on to appointments. Commissioners, do you have any appointments this evening?
Yes, commissioners. Tim Lyons was eligible for reappointment to the Heritage Conservation Council in May, and I have failed to get that to you in a timely manner. He is eager to continue to serve and has been doing so since May.
I would be glad to make that motion if commissioners are ready. I move to reappoint Tim Lyons to the Heritage Conservation Council.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you for your service, Tim.
I'd also mentioned that the appointment we made last week of Nolan Jones we were wrong. He does live in the city of Eudora, so he cannot serve on BZA. For BZA appointments, they have to live in the unincorporated area. So we can't appoint him. Commissioner Dorsey has passed that along to him and we'll think about him for some other spots. So we still have that opening on BZA.
I've reached out to one name and they were not interested at this time, so I'll keep working too.
And just to clarify, is that still just one position that is expiring October 31st? That's reflected in today's memo?
I believe so.
Okay. Just making sure it wasn't two positions.
I think we filled one other one earlier, so we just have one spot left.
Okay.
And it's important to remember, BZA only meets if there's something to meet on, so it's a pretty low commitment item.
All right. Any other appointments? We'll move on to miscellaneous items and we begin with Sarah's memo.
Commissioners, lots of dates and times in my memo this week. I did want to talk to you about next week. So we'd scheduled for a work session and most of this is going to be about the child care scholarship, less about pre-apprenticeship, as Jill's put it together. I believe next week, Commissioner Kelly will not be able to attend the 4 o'clock work session and Commissioner Willie will be remote. Right? So are you hoping to be back by then? You're hoping to be back by then? Okay. We could easily move that item to the 5:30 business meeting. It's not a very full agenda, knock on wood so far. So if the commission is okay with it, I would recommend that we cancel the 4 o'clock work session, move the item to 5:30 to the agenda. And we've checked with the presenter, with the folks that are coming in to do that. I don't think the update's going to take a full hour anyway. And then that way we can just make sure, it's just always hard when you give commissioners remote and one gone. That way, at least, we'll have everyone there, whether in person or remote. Does that work for the commission?
Helpful.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Yep, we'll move it to 5:30 and we'll update our calendar accordingly. And that's all I have, commissioners.
Thank you, Sarah. Miscellaneous items, Commissioner.
Is anyone else attending the KDOT local work session tomorrow, Topeka? Nope. All right, just me.
Sarah, I want to ask a question. We had some public comment tonight about addresses in minutes, and just a point of order, John, you could have pulled that item, just so you know, from the consent agenda, and we could have discussed it before we passed the consent agenda. So just so that you know, we've always asked for addresses for the minutes. I was interested to hear that the city and the school board, and I remember being on the school board, not being on the school board, but being in a few number of school board meetings, not hearing that. Is there something is it just always been our policy, or is it?
It's the historical practice that we have had. I would say that if someone comes up for public comment and they write their address on that paper is a public document.
Okay.
So when folks just write 66044 on it and we just put 66044, so it's not, we don't pick and choose. We go off what's in the public document on that piece of paper. And so I don't have the ability to just look up people's names and addresses and find out where they live. So we go off that document. That document is a public record. So while I wouldn't have to put it in the minutes, it is a public document. So I think that's why some folks choose to just give their zip code or say they live in what city they live in. But I think the commission could decide not to print it in the minutes, but I think I still have to put that with the record of the meeting because it's being shared. Anything shared in a meeting is a public document and is an open record.
I appreciate that clarification. And I think some people state their address, even if they don't write it down, they state their address rather than a zip code or street name only or city only. And generally, I find that the minutes are reflective of that and inclusive of what was stated. However, I will express that it's something that I've flagged in my brain before. I mean, as a previous public commenter, I would never give my address and only give a zip code. So I think that, it's possible for us to think about just phrasing it specifically to ask for zip codes, which is really non-identifying. And that it never hinges on whether or not we receive the public comment, right? Or that's not a requirement, although I have been to other meetings in other places that are not here that do require stating, and they do have a codified policy to require that you state an address within the constituency. And that's not something that we practice here. So I certainly can understand the concerns. I've heard individually from people before that they wish their address hadn't been printed and had the conversation about that if it's disclosed, then it's included in the minutes, is what I understand to be the practice.
I would also add, and having been the person for many, many years in this organization that helped manage whether or not you could exempt your address from public records, there are now other folks in this organization who do this. Kansas law is very strict about this. You can only hide someone's address if they are a member of law enforcement or a judge. I've had people come to me and say they really don't want their address included on the property viewer. And I have to tell them, I'm sorry. Because the only way we can exempt it from property viewer is if they are a member of law enforcement and they sign a specific set of forms authorizing us to do so, or they're a member of the justice system.
So I've thought about this some also, but also the value of the communication, especially around land use items, but certainly for, for other things policy wise, gives us to have some idea of where folks reside. Also helps give some context to their experience in our community. I'd say especially when we have like land use issues where people are either near to a property in question or not near to a property in question, which both can be of value, but they interact differently with the item that we're considering. We've had folks coming about a particular policy change that sharing zip codes, which was fine, but it also gave us some idea of what cities and what rural areas are represented and which ones aren't. So I've really valued having that kind of extra context, and maybe it's the geographer in me, not necessarily the actual address, but like, hey, I live in the Prairie Park neighborhood, or just zip code alone doesn't even tell you if you live within the city limits or outside of the city limits, which we have a variety of code that applies to people who live outside of the city limits that we can't apply to people who live inside the city limits, because people who don't live in the rural area often don't know that 66049 can go almost all the way to Lecompton, or that a Lawrence postal code address, you might live 15 miles from the city of Lawrence. So the zip code alone doesn't give that same amount of context, but I don't always necessarily need it granular either. A lot of folks tend to just choose what feels comfortable to them, and we've never poked beyond that. So I think for the most part, that's worked relatively well. But I think of people who come and interact with us here that we might think, that's a voice that would be nice to have on the BZA. Do they live within the city of Eudora, or would they? So it helps us kind of know who we're interacting with also. In terms of when our addresses are not private in any way, shape, or form. I think they're in the newspaper. So that I think it's okay to certainly ask for people to identify themselves in their names, and and have some ownership of the comment that they bring, because we do. So I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to ask, but I've always been comfortable with people kind of choosing their comfort level too. So that to say, I value as much information as people will bring us when they bring us public comment.
I also value to a degree knowing where people live within the county so that we can understand why they're coming to us, right? And their concerns and as they relate to our district, or as they relate to the subject that they're speaking on. And if providing their address is preventing them from actually speaking to us, I wouldn't want that to be a deterrent. So if there's the opportunity to edit the actual document that is sitting over there to maybe just reflect a name and maybe a zip code or a district or an area of the county, whether it be Prairie Park, right, or some other way of us identifying them that's not an address, so that they can then identify themselves without putting a full address. Now, if they want to put a full address, they can put a full address, because some people do come before us and they give their name, Erica Anderson, and they choose to state their entire address. And so if that's what they want to do for the minutes, they can. But for those that don't want to go into that detail, even on paper or, as they're speaking, it would be nice to then have the opportunity to change or edit the actual paper so that people don't feel like they have to actually give their address.
I mean, I think we could say location if desired, or something like that, or if applicable, I don't know, something like that. Desire if location if you want, it feels, but I think we could certainly modify the sign-in sheet if that's what the commission wants to do. But if they say their address in a public meeting, It is in the minutes. It's a public document.
What if so I have a question for Sarah, and we might not know the answer, and that's fine. If someone gave their public address in an earlier comment, say the first time they showed up, right, they gave their address, and then after that didn't give their address, do we know what the practice is? Do we go back and use their address from past times and include it?
I'd
in
have to
here?
ask Robin, but we could find
Okay,
that out.
Yeah, and that sort of offers the idea that, if that is what we're doing, right, is there a way for someone to say, I don't want my full address included, in those minutes because it's not part of this meeting. I don't know what that is. I'm going to recommend that, just sort of listening to the commission, that I work with Sarah a little bit because that's what's in our opening statement. Please give your name and full address. Why don't I work with Sarah and Robin a little bit to figure this out? I think there's some desire. I mean, Commissioner Reed is right. We don't not take your public comment if you don't give us your full address, right? So maybe right now we just need to sort of articulate what the option is. And, I think commissioners have made a good case. I sort of agree with that, especially on planning items. It's very helpful to know where they live and how they're related to it. And I can see somebody at one meeting saying, I live here, and then coming for another meeting on something entirely different and not really wanting to have their address put in again, and may just say, I live in Lawrence, or I live in whatever that is. So I'd like to give some flexibility, but I also want to understand how we've used the addresses that people have provided in the past going forward.
I know we've had instances where we had someone who gave public comment that we wanted to respond to them outside of the meeting and didn't have any way to do that. We've got a name, which is all that was stated. And sometimes there's an address. I think in the particular case I'm thinking of, there wasn't. So it was like waiting until I see this person again and saying, can you share some way that we can get that information back to you? Since we don't typically, answer back at that time. And some folks will, we ask in our opening statement to, leave information with staff. It doesn't have to be on that sign-up sheet, which is a public document, but that's not been the practice that people typically do that. And then, we're kind of hampered in our ability to respond.
Sorry, John. Appreciate that. Okay, I'll be happy to work with Sarah on that. I might visit with John a little bit after the meeting and hear some more thoughts on that. But thanks for bringing that up. I like when we think about historical practices and why we do them, and maybe we used to use a gavel here once upon a time. So
The people still use
lots of
gavel.
people still use gavels, but we do not. So really appreciate that. Any other miscellaneous items, commissioners? I might update, I'm not going to say might because I'm going to do it. We had another meeting of the five and included some treasurers, and fortunately Adam's not here anymore. I was hoping to chat with him a little bit, very specifically thinking about how we might approach the state legislature about the fees for vehicle sales tax. We got to hear a lot more detail around some things that might be occurring at the state level, some legislation that might be being written, some work with possible dealers and things like that. I think we're still working on a strategy. I think there are different needs when it comes for property taxes for vehicles and how those are processed in different parts of the state. What small counties need is very different than large counties. And I would even say, listening to Sedgwick and Johnson, that what's happening in their county is a little different than what's happening here. In some ways, I think we could teach them some things about some online resources that we provide. But I just want you all to know that is ongoing. If you have specific concerns, or you want to talk about specific strategies that maybe you think, just reach out to me or reach out to Sarah, and we can talk through that. That won't be an action item here unless we include it in our legislative statement.
I'll give a quick update of the solid waste management plan group that you guys put me on while I was not here.
You're welcome.
Yeah. so actively meeting, it's the two counties, it's Jefferson County and Douglas County, working on a survey that goes out. There was some question about, can it be all one survey? But City of Lawrence had specific questions that didn't apply to either the other two, either the other county entities. So I think there's going to be separate one county, one inside of Lawrence and one everybody else survey that'll go out. But I just kind of as a practice, I think it's really nice for us to know when something like a survey is going to hit the public, because people will come back and have questions to us. And I know there have been times when something's been working through staff. I'm like, yeah, I actually didn't know anything about that. So I just think as a practice, it's really nice for us to know when that's coming out. I don't know what the timing is on it, but there will be a really fun solid waste survey coming out to everybody. Thanks.
All right. Any other business, commissioners? All right. With that, we're adjourned.